School security attacks. Black woman's son. She drags the school board to court. The sound of bone hitting metal echoed through the corridor, sharp and sudden, like a gunshot. Jason Monroe's head slammed against the locker door with a sickening clang, his body collapsing to the ground in front of 30 stunned students. "Hands behind your back, now!" barked Officer Trent Calhoun, the bulky white security guard towering over Jason's crumpled body. Jason, dazed and bleeding from his forehead, barely had time to register what was happening before his arms were yanked behind him and cold steel clamped around his wrists. A phone skittered across the tile floor. "He didn't even do anything!" a girl's voice cried from somewhere down the hall. Phones were already out, cameras recording. Shocked whispers filled the air as students captured every second. The blood, the panic, the fear etched on Jason's face. He was 14. He hadn't raised his voice, hadn't thrown a punch. All he did was tell Officer Calhoun, "My mom asked me not to let anyone go through my phone without her there." That was it. 20 minutes later, Danielle Monroe walked into the front office of Westbridge Middle School, her hospital scrubs still faintly smelling of antiseptic. She had come straight from the clinic, having dropped everything when she got the call from the school secretary. "There was an incident involving your son. You may want to come down here immediately." She wasn't expecting to see her only child bruised, handcuffed, and seated alone in a locked room with dried blood streaked down the side of his face. "What happened?" she demanded, her voice low, trembling and dangerous. Vice Principal Kelly Stone, a woman in her 50s with a permanently pursed expression, folded her hands over a clipboard and avoided eye contact. "There was an altercation," she said, forcing a neutral tone. Jason refused to comply with Officer Calhoun's instructions. The officer acted to protect the safety of the student body. Danielle stared at her, unblinking. "You mean he beat my son's head into a locker because he wouldn't unlock his phone?" "Mrs. Monroe, I think we need to be careful with our assumptions here. Jason was being uncooperative and—" "I'm sorry, do you mean cautious, assertive, or uncooperative?" Danielle's voice rose slightly. "Because those are 3 very different words, and only one of them is used to justify throwing a black child against a wall." Kelly flinched. "Let's stay calm." "I am calm," Danielle snapped, "but I want my son released, now. And I want to speak to this officer. I'm afraid Officer Calhoun has already filed a report, and he's within his rights to detain students under district safety protocol." Danielle leaned in. "Let me be absolutely clear. My son was assaulted. You're going to uncuff him. You're going to let me take him to the hospital, and then you're going to call your legal counsel, because if you think this ends with a suspension report, you have no idea who I am." Jason sat silently on the cot, shoulders trembling, head lowered. When Danielle finally walked into the room and saw his face, her heart cracked. The boy was barely holding it together. His wrist was already red from the cuffs. She knelt in front of him, brushing his curls back from his forehead, gently touching the swelling. "You okay, baby?" "I'm fine," Jason whispered, eyes glassy. "No, you're not," she said, and turned to the officer standing nearby. "Take them off." "She's not authorized to—" Danielle took out her phone and began recording. "You've assaulted a minor. You're unlawfully detaining him. Unless you'd like to explain that on the evening news, you're going to remove those cuffs." The officer hesitated, then muttered, "Fine," and clicked them open. Jason winced as the cuffs came off. "Let's go," she said, helping her son to his feet. "Mrs. Monroe," Kelly called after her, "we're not done with this." Danielle turned in the doorway. "Oh, we are very much just getting started." At the hospital, after Jason had been examined, scanned, and treated for a mild concussion, Danielle sat by his side, watching him sleep under warm blankets. The rage was coiled tight in her chest, but she kept it caged for now. Years ago, before she'd stepped away from public life, Danielle Monroe had worked for the Department of Justice in their Civil Rights Division. She'd sat across from sheriffs with Confederate flags on their bumpers and forced apologies out of mayors who thought Jim Crow never really ended. She'd investigated excessive force claims, prosecuted corrupt housing boards, and pulled the teeth out of racially skewed school policies. She'd also seen the toll it took on her marriage, on her health, on Jason. So she'd left, moved to a small town in Illinois, became a nurse practitioner, built a quiet life. But justice, like muscle memory, never really leaves you. And they had just broken the last barrier she'd tried so hard to build to protect her son from the world she thought she'd left behind. She opened her phone, started downloading the video clips that students had posted online, different angles, different lengths, but all showing the same thing. Jason had done nothing wrong, and yet he'd been thrown, restrained, humiliated, and bloodied. In the same hallway where other kids were allowed to vape behind lockers without consequence. There would be no more silence, no more letting the system explain things away, no more pretending her past didn't matter. They wanted a fight? They had picked the wrong mother. As she watched the screen, a twist of irony struck her. Jason, who always avoided conflict, who never raised his voice, who had been told from the time he was 9 to keep his hands in sight, speak respectfully, and never run, was now at the center of something much bigger than either of them. She pulled up an old contact, Lorenzo Banks, civil rights attorney, loud, relentless, brilliant, her former partner on a dozen DOJ cases. She hadn't called him in years. But tonight she typed one line and hit send. "I need you. My son was assaulted in school, and they don't know who they just messed with." The next morning, the school sent out a generic statement about an unfortunate incident involving a routine safety check. There was no mention of Jason, no mention of the cuffs, no mention of the fact that Danielle had refused to sign the incident resolution form they'd slid across the table. But there was one thing they didn't know yet. Danielle Monroe had already begun drafting a federal civil lawsuit, and she was just warming up. Danielle Monroe sat at her kitchen table, eyes locked on her laptop screen, the only light in the house coming from its pale glow. Jason was upstairs, finally asleep after an evening of silence and painkillers. He hadn't spoken much on the ride home from the hospital. He just kept looking out the window, chewing on his sleeve the way he did when he was overwhelmed. Danielle's fingers moved fast, not from panic, from precision. She wasn't just angry, she was activated. Behind her calm eyes, a war room was taking shape. Tabs filled her browser, Illinois Civil Code on excessive force in schools, federal statutes on qualified immunity, recent case precedents, local court records. She found Officer Trent Calhoun's full name in a public security registry, then pulled his license. What she found made her sit back and exhale. 3 complaints. None of them had led to discipline. 2 of the records were sealed, but she recognized the redactions. She'd seen hundreds like them in her old work. Calhoun had a pattern, just not one the district wanted to acknowledge. She copied everything. The door creaked behind her. Jason stood in the hallway, wrapped in a blanket. "You're still up," he said quietly. "Couldn't sleep," she replied, closing the laptop halfway. "You okay?" "I had a dream I was falling, but there was no ground." Danielle's heart twisted. She pulled out the chair next to her. "Come sit." He did, slowly, and for a long moment they didn't speak. Finally, Jason whispered, "Are they going to do it again?" Danielle turned to him. "Not if I have anything to say about it. They said I was dangerous, that I looked like I was about to do something." She nodded. "I know. That's what they always say." Jason's voice cracked. "I didn't even raise my voice, Mom." "I know, baby." He looked up at her. "Are we gonna move again?" That hit her harder than anything else. "We're not running. Not this time." Jason swallowed, unsure. What if they come after you? She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Then they'll really find out who I am. The next day at school, Jason walked through the halls with his hood up, eyes down. Kids stared. Some whispered. One boy smirked as he passed and muttered, "Look, it's the thug with a phone problem." Jason clenched his jaw and kept walking. In English class, a substitute teacher, a wiry man named Mr. Halbrook, paused when Jason entered. "You," he said, pointing, "no phones today, understood?" Jason didn't respond. "Understood?" the man repeated louder. Jason took his seat and stayed silent. Halbrook narrowed his eyes. "Students who can't follow rules can leave." Jason stared at his desk. The other kids watched, unsure if they should laugh or look away. The tension built. Suddenly, a girl raised her hand. "Mr. Halbrook," she said, voice trembling, "you don't need to yell." Halbrook frowned. "I'm not yelling." "You kind of are," said another boy in the back. The class shifted. Murmurs. A current of resistance. Jason glanced around. This had never happened before. It was small, but it was something. After school, Danielle received an email from the school board. Subject: Student Disciplinary Hearing Notice. They wanted Jason to attend a closed-door hearing on Friday regarding disruptive behavior and failure to comply with safety directives. Danielle read the message 3 times, then clicked Print. She folded the paper and slid it into a manila folder already thick with notes. Then she picked up her phone and called Lorenzo. He answered on the second ring. "I was wondering when I'd hear from you again." "I'm sending you a file," she said without preamble. "This isn't just one bad apple, there's a whole damn orchard. You're finally going public?" Danielle took a breath. "Yeah, but not just yet. I want them to underestimate me first." Lorenzo laughed. "Classic D, quiet storm." She sent over the video footage, Calhoun's records, the disciplinary hearing notice. "You're not filing yet?" he asked. "Not until after the hearing. Let them put their foot in it first. I want them on record saying this was justified." There was silence on the line for a moment. "Danielle, you know once this starts, it won't be just about Jason. They're gonna come for you too." "I'm counting on it." On Thursday, just a day before the hearing, Danielle received a strange call. A woman named Veronica Hughes, who identified herself as a parent in the district, asked to meet. "I don't want to talk over the phone," she said, "but I think you should know something before tomorrow." They met at a coffee shop on the edge of town. Veronica was mid-40s, tired eyes, and looked like she hadn't slept properly in weeks. "I saw the video," she began, "and it looked almost exactly like what happened to my son 2 years ago." Danielle's hand stopped mid-stir. "You never said anything." "We tried, but there was no video. They said my son made it up. They threatened to suspend him if we spread false accusations. And we didn't have the means to fight them." Danielle leaned forward. "Who handled it?" "Same officer, Calhoun, same vice principal, and same result." Veronica pulled out a folder. Photos, notes, emails. Her son's written statement from 2 years ago. It had never made it to any public record. Danielle felt the room tilt slightly. This wasn't just about Jason. This was systemic. "Why now?" she asked. "Because someone finally pushed back, and I don't want to be quiet anymore." Danielle reached across the table and took her hand. "Then you won't be." That night, as Jason was getting ready for bed, he stood in the doorway of Danielle's room. "Mom," she looked up from her laptop. "Yeah? Do you think I'm weak?" Danielle's chest tightened. "What?" "For not fighting back, for freezing." She stood, walked to him, and placed both hands on his shoulders. "Jason Monroe, listen to me. The strongest thing you did that day was stay calm while someone tried to humiliate you. You kept your head when a grown man lost his. That's not weakness, that's power." Jason blinked fast. His voice wavered. "So you're not mad at me?" "I'm proud of you." He nodded, then hugged her tight. And in that quiet moment, with the storm gathering outside, Danielle knew exactly what kind of fight they were in for. But this time, she wasn't fighting for a policy change or a press release. She was fighting for her son, for his future, and for every parent who never had the chance to fight back. The room smelled like varnish and stale coffee. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. A long rectangular table stood at the center of the school board conference room, surrounded by 5 chairs, filled with people who already looked like they'd made up their minds. Danielle Monroe sat across from them, wearing a navy blazer over her scrubs. She had come straight from a 12-hour shift. She kept her expression neutral, even as her hands rested protectively on Jason's shoulder. He sat beside her, head low, a fresh bandage still visible on his temple. Superintendent Walter Griggs adjusted his tie and cleared his throat. "Let's begin." No introduction, no pleasantries, just bureaucracy masked as order. "This hearing is to review the disciplinary referral for Jason Monroe," said Vice Principal Kelly Stone, flipping through a stack of papers. "The incident in question involved insubordination and failure to comply with a lawful directive from a school safety officer." Danielle interjected before the next sentence could form. "Let's pause right there. Just so we're all on the same page. This hearing is about my son being assaulted by Officer Calhoun, is it not?" Kelly didn't blink. "It's about reviewing Jason's behavior during the incident. Officer Calhoun has submitted his report." Danielle held up a flash drive. "And I have video evidence that contradicts every word in it." Griggs leaned forward. "Mrs. Monroe, please understand that this process is in place to ensure fairness for all parties." "No," Danielle cut in, her voice sharp. "This process is in place to protect your institution from liability. Let's not pretend otherwise." One of the board members, a middle-aged man with a bushy mustache, chimed in. "We're just following district protocol." "Interesting," Danielle replied. "Because I've reviewed your district's safety protocol. Nowhere in it does it authorize an officer to use force unless a student poses a clear and present danger to themselves or others. Jason posed no threat. He was holding a phone. He said no." Jason looked down, fingers fidgeting under the table. Griggs shifted uncomfortably. "Regardless, we have to assess whether Jason's actions contributed to the situation." "He contributed by being a black boy who dared to assert his rights," Danielle said, her voice low and even. "And I hope someone in this room is prepared to say that out loud." Silence filled the room. Across the table, Kelly tried to reset the tone. "Let's keep things constructive." Danielle opened her folder, pulled out the printout of Officer Calhoun's disciplinary history, and slid it across the table. "I found these," she said. 3 previous complaints, 2 sealed, all buried." Griggs frowned. "How did you obtain that?" "I requested it through legal channels, and you should be more worried about why this man is still employed around children than how I got the information." The air turned electric. Then came the knock on the door. A woman stepped inside. It was Veronica Hughes. She held a folder tightly in her hands. "Excuse me," she said to the room, her voice trembling. I need to speak." Griggs raised a brow. "This is a closed hearing. I'm aware, but I have information that needs to be entered into the record. Information about Officer Calhoun." Danielle turned slightly, shocked. She hadn't expected Veronica to come forward so soon. Griggs looked annoyed. "Who are you?" "My name is Veronica Hughes. My son attended Westbridge 2 years ago. He was also assaulted by Calhoun. We filed a complaint. It went nowhere. I was silenced." Danielle stood. "She's a witness, and I want her testimony included." The board conferred quietly for a moment, clearly thrown off script. Grudgingly, Griggs nodded. "Fine. Briefly." Veronica's voice shook as she told her story. How her son had been grabbed by the collar, shoved into a desk, and accused of stealing someone's backpack, though no theft had occurred. How they were told it was a misunderstanding, how the school discouraged her from going public, how they threatened her son with expulsion. My boy was 10, she said, eyes wet, and we had no power to fight you, but she does. She pointed to Danielle. Danielle didn't move, but something shifted in the room. The board members no longer looked certain, they looked exposed. Griggs cleared his throat again, but it cracked this time. Thank you. We'll take your statement under review. Danielle sat back down, locking eyes with each of them. I suggest you start doing more than reviewing, because this isn't just about Jason. This is about the culture you've allowed to fester here, one that protects the adults in power and punishes the kids who don't know they're supposed to stay silent. Kelly's hand trembled as she adjusted her glasses. The board will deliberate and issue a decision within 5 business days. Danielle stood, gathering her papers. You'll make whatever decision you want, but I'll be making mine, too. She took Jason's hand. He stood with her. Come on, baby, she said. Let's get out of this snake pit. As they left the room, Veronica followed close behind, her shoulders lighter than they had been in years. Outside, in the hallway, Jason finally looked up at his mother. You think they'll suspend me? Danielle smiled slightly, eyes focused ahead. Maybe. But you're not worried? No. Because whether they do or not, they already lost. Jason looked puzzled. How? Danielle turned toward him. Because today we didn't walk in here asking for permission to be heard. We walked in owning the truth. And that truth was about to make a whole lot of people uncomfortable. It was just past midnight when Danielle Monroe opened the email that changed everything. She was sitting on her bed, Jason already asleep in the room next door. The house was quiet, her laptop softly glowing in the dark, casting pale light across the open legal pads and files scattered around her. The email came from Lorenzo. Subject: urgent. Discovery from FOA request. She clicked it open. Attached were dozens of pages, internal district memos, redacted emails, and one document that made her breath catch. It was a staff communication chain between Westbridge Middle School administrators, dated just 2 days after Jason's incident. In the email, Vice Principal Kelly Stone discussed strategies on how to contain the public narrative, referring specifically to Danielle as a potential PR liability due to her professional background. Below that, Superintendent Griggs had written, "We need to get ahead of this before it turns into another Ferguson." Danielle stood at her kitchen window watching the neighborhood stir, sipping her coffee with steady hands. This wasn't just about her son anymore. This was about every kid who had been silenced, pushed, bruised, or erased by a system that pretended to protect them. And she wasn't going anywhere. The protesters outside the Westbridge district office chanted in unison, their voices rising above the chilly morning wind. No justice, no peace, signs bobbed above the crowd. Protect our kids, not your image. Suspend Calhoun, not Jason. How many more? Danielle stood just behind the front line of parents and students, her arms crossed, sunglasses shielding her eyes from both the sun and the swarm of reporters. Jason stood beside her, tense but steady, his fists tucked into his hoodie pocket. Are you ready for this? She asked without looking at him. Jason nodded. I think so. You're not just speaking for yourself anymore, baby. You're speaking for every kid who never got the chance. He inhaled, slow and deep. I won't mess it up. She reached over and squeezed his hand. You couldn't mess this up even if you tried. Inside the building, the school board was meeting for the first time since the story broke. They hadn't expected the firestorm. Parents were demanding action. Teachers were whispering about resigning. Even a few donors were threatening to pull funding. Still, the district's lawyers were busy preparing their defense, not against the accusations but against Danielle herself. She's a professional agitator, one legal rep said during the closed-door session, trained to weaponize public opinion. She's a mother, countered board member Carol Wynn, one of the few voices sympathetic to the Monroes. A mother whose kid was assaulted on our watch. We need to be careful, Superintendent Griggs muttered. If we discipline Calhoun, we're admitting fault, and if this thing goes to court— It's already going to court, Carol said. The question now is, are we going to dig in or finally do the right thing? Griggs looked around, searching for backup. The room had gone quiet. Later that afternoon, Danielle met with Lorenzo at a quiet law office downtown. They'd converted one of the conference rooms into a war room, whiteboards covered in timelines, incident reports, press coverage, and sworn statements. There's movement, Lorenzo said, sliding a manila folder toward her. 3 more families came forward, all with similar stories. Danielle flipped it open. Photos, testimonies. One even included a written statement from a retired janitor who had witnessed Calhoun drag a kid into a supply closet years ago and rough him up, then threatened him into silence. Danielle exhaled slowly. This isn't a case anymore. It's a pattern. Lorenzo leaned forward. We can push this into federal court by next month. Civil rights violation under Title VI. If we show systemic racial bias, it could open a Department of Education investigation. Danielle nodded. Let's do it. But there's something else, Lorenzo added. They're going after you. She raised an eyebrow. They're digging through your DOJ past, trying to paint you as unstable. I've already been asked for comment about a case from 20. The one where you called out the mayor of Trenton for hiding police brutality stats. Danielle didn't flinch. They're desperate. That case was airtight. They're also whispering that you came here to stir up trouble, that you planned this from the start. She gave a humorless laugh. Right. Because nothing says master plan like moving to a quiet town and working 12-hour shifts in urgent care. Lorenzo looked at her seriously. They're not trying to win the lawsuit, Danielle. They're trying to discredit you in the court of public opinion. Then they're going to need better ammo, he smirked. That's the spirit. At school, Jason was feeling the pressure. He'd been pulled aside by the principal that morning and told he could resume classes, pending good behavior. But when he walked into history class, half the room fell silent. Some kids stared. Others whispered. One boy muttered something under his breath. Jason sat in the back and tried to focus. But it wasn't until lunch that the tension broke. He was walking to the cafeteria when a senior, football player, big, loud, stepped in front of him. You think you're a hero now, the boy sneered. You just got lucky your mom's some lawyer or whatever. Jason didn't say anything. He tried to sidestep, but the boy shoved him. What, you gonna cry again? Jason's chest tightened, his fists curled, but before he could react, another voice cut in. Back off, Logan. It was Serena Kim, a junior, sharp-tongued and fearless. She stood between them, arms crossed. You touch him again. I swear I'll post the video of you crying after you lost the regional game last fall. Logan hesitated, glared at her, then stalked off. Jason blinked. Thanks. Serena shrugged. Bullies like him hate being ignored. Keep ignoring him. You didn't have to step in. Yeah, she said, smirking. But I wanted to. People see you standing up. It matters. Jason looked around. A few students had paused to watch. But now some nodded at him. A shift was happening. Quiet but real. That night, Danielle was brushing her teeth when Jason knocked on the bathroom door. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why did you wait to tell people who you were, about the DOJ stuff? Danielle leaned on the counter, toothbrush still in hand. Because I wanted to live in peace. I wanted you to have a normal life. Not one where people watched every move, waiting to see if you'd cause trouble. Jason hesitated. Do you regret it? She thought for a moment. I regret thinking I could outrun injustice by staying quiet. But I don't regret fighting now. He nodded, then turned to go. But he paused. I'm glad you're my mom. Danielle smiled, her eyes glistening. I'm glad you're my son. And in that quiet space, beyond the headlines, beyond the hearings, beyond the politics, there was the unshakable truth that started all of this. A mother, a son, and the line they refused to let anyone cross again. The courthouse hallway was colder than Danielle remembered, not because of the air conditioning, but because of the silence, that tight, uncomfortable kind that only exists when everyone's waiting for something big to explode. Reporters lined the entrance. Some stood behind stanchions, others murmured into mics, cameras already rolling. Protesters stood further down the block, bundled in coats and holding signs. The press dubbed it the Monroe v. Westbridge hearing, though it was technically a pre-trial evidentiary session. Danielle adjusted the collar of her blazer and looked over at Jason, who sat on the bench outside the courtroom doors. "You okay?" she asked. He nodded slowly. "Yeah, just nervous. You don't have to say a word in there." "I know, I just don't want to let you down." Danielle leaned in, pressing a kiss to his temple. "You couldn't if you tried." The doors opened. A bailiff called Case OI-2, Monroe v. Westbridge School District, preliminary hearing. Danielle stood tall and walked through the doors, Lorenzo beside her, carrying a laptop, 2 legal pads, and the quiet fury of someone with nothing left to prove. Inside, the room buzzed with anticipation. On the other side sat the district's legal team, 4 attorneys in gray suits, stone-faced. Officer Trent Calhoun sat behind them, his jaw clenched, arms folded across his chest. Danielle's eyes locked onto him for a second. He looked less cocky now, less smug. Good, she thought. Let the fear sit for a while. Judge Naomi Candler, a black woman in her 50s with piercing eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, stepped into the courtroom and took her seat. "Counsel, begin," she said, flipping through her file. Lorenzo stood. "Your Honor, we intend to show today that Officer Trent Calhoun, acting under the authority of the Westbridge School District, engaged in an act of excessive force against Jason Monroe, a minor, without legal justification or provocation. We also intend to present evidence that the district not only failed to prevent this abuse, but has cultivated a systemic culture of silence and retaliation for years." The lead defense attorney, Gregory Whitlock, rose next. "With all due respect, Your Honor, what the plaintiffs are attempting is not a search for justice, but a media stunt built on half-truths and sensationalism. Officer Calhoun acted within the district's safety protocols, and Jason Monroe's refusal to comply created a situation that required immediate control." Judge Candler raised an eyebrow. "We'll see." Lorenzo called their first witness, Veronica Hughes. She walked to the stand, visibly nervous but resolute. "Ms. Hughes, can you tell the court what happened to your son 2 years ago?" Veronica nodded, hands clasped tightly. "He was pulled from class by Officer Calhoun for a locker search. No warning, no call to me. I found out when he came home with a swollen lip and bruised ribs." "Did you file a complaint?" "I did." "Nothing happened, no investigation. Just silence." Lorenzo nodded. "Thank you." As she stepped down, Danielle noticed murmurs ripple through the audience. The power of testimony wasn't in the shouting, it was in the quiet truth that no one could ignore. Next, Lorenzo called Cameron Diaz. She took the stand, clutching a thick manila folder. A former district communications employee, she confirmed that the internal email exchange calling Danielle a PR liability was authentic. "And do you recognize this?" Lorenzo asked, holding up a printed page. "Yes. It's an internal risk mitigation memo drafted by the superintendent's office." "Can you read the highlighted portion, please?" Cameron's voice shook. Quote, "Contain Monroe's narrative before media involvement. Leverage her former DOJ status to imply bias or personal vendetta." The courtroom stirred. Danielle sat still, watching. Judge Candler tapped her pen against the bench. "Is that official district communication, Ms. Diaz?" "Yes, Your Honor. I was there when it was discussed." On the defense table, Whitlock visibly tensed. But Lorenzo wasn't done. He tapped his laptop and turned to the screen projector beside the judge. One last exhibit, he said. A surprise witness just submitted this under oath yesterday. The screen flickered to life, and a video began to play. A grainy security camera recording, time-stamped, dated 8 months prior. The footage showed Officer Calhoun shoving a young boy into a wall near the school gym. The child's face was barely visible, but the uniform and backpack were unmistakable. Jason gasped. "That's Marcus Clay," he whispered. Danielle turned to Lorenzo, stunned. This footage was recovered by the child's older cousin, who worked a tea for the district, Lorenzo explained to the judge. It was wiped from the system, but not before a backup was made. Judge Candler leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "I assume you'll be submitting a copy into evidence?" "Yes, Your Honor." The defense scrambled. Whitlock stood. "We weren't given notice of this footage. This is highly irregular." "But not inadmissible," the judge cut him off, "and quite damning." The gavel hit the desk with a controlled smack. "This court finds sufficient grounds to proceed to trial. All parties will prepare for full discovery and depositions, and I strongly suggest the district rethink its definition of safety protocol." Danielle exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. They'd done it. They cracked the wall wide open. Outside the courtroom, cameras flashed. Reporters surged. Danielle turned to Jason. "You see that?" she said, her voice calm. Jason nodded, a rare smile breaking through. "We're not just fighting back anymore," he said. "No," Danielle replied. "Now we're changing the rules." The storm had officially broken. The story hit the national media that evening. Every major network had a segment about the Westbridge scandal, complete with security footage, witness quotes, and a clip of Danielle Monroe walking out of the courthouse with her son. Danielle's phone hadn't stopped vibrating. Reporters, activists, even old classmates from law school were calling. Some offered congratulations, others wanted interviews. But none of it mattered compared to what came next, the school board hearing scheduled for Friday. That hearing, originally planned to address routine district procedures, had now become a public reckoning. Inside Danielle's home, tension ran high. Jason sat on the couch, knees bouncing, staring at his tablet. "Do you think they'll even show up, Mom? The board?" "Oh, they'll show," Danielle Setitier said, pouring tea into 2 mugs. "They want to control the narrative, but we're not going to let them." "Are we still going to bring up Marcus?" Danielle paused. "Yes, we're not just fighting for you anymore." At Westbridge Town Hall that Friday, the building was overflowing. Local parents packed the rows, some holding signs reading, "Protect our kids," and "Justice for Jason." Reporters hovered around the doors. Security was doubled, but no one dared be heavy-handed this time. The board members walked in, faces tight, eyes cautious. Superintendent Calhoun was absent. "Medical leave," his assistant claimed. Danielle stood when her name was called. "We now invite Ms. Danielle Monroe to speak," the chairwoman said, clearly trying to sound neutral. Danielle stepped up to the podium, calm and poised. Behind her, Jason sat next to Lorenzo, who had been unusually quiet all morning. Watching. "My name is Danielle Monroe. I'm a civil rights attorney, a mother and a woman who trusted this school district with her child. That trust was shattered." She paused, letting the words hang. "My son was assaulted by your employee, Officer Trent Calhoun. He was targeted, humiliated, and injured. And when I asked for accountability, you tried to silence me. You deleted footage. You slandered my name. You framed it as me being difficult." The board shifted in their seats. "I'm not here to make you uncomfortable. I'm here because I've already been there. Comfort was stripped from me the day I saw my son afraid to walk through your doors." Danielle pulled out a flash drive. "This contains 5 internal memos, 3 suppressed incident reports, and 1 signed contract between the district and a private security firm that allowed Calhoun to operate without state certification." Gasps echoed through the room. She continued, eyes locked on the board. I'm submitting this as public record, and I'm telling you this doesn't end in this room. You don't just get to walk away. A woman in the back of the room stood up. Veronica Hughes, then another mother, and another. Voices rose. My son was assaulted too. They covered up when my daughter was shoved into a locker. You told me it was my child's fault. The board chairwoman banged her gavel, but it was no use. The tide had turned. Just then a voice echoed from the side door. Calm, crisp. You may want to listen to her. All eyes turned as a tall woman in a dark blazer entered. Deputy Attorney General Cheryl Evans. Danielle blinked. Cheryl? Evans gave a quick nod and held up a document. Ms. Monroe filed a complaint with our office last month. Based on our preliminary findings, we are opening a federal investigation into the Westbridge School District for systemic civil rights violations. Pandemonium. The chairwoman stood, flustered. This is highly irregular. It's overdue, Cheryl cut in, and legally binding. Your internal practices are no longer just a school matter. They are a federal concern. Danielle stepped down from the podium, heart racing. Jason whispered, You called in the Department of Justice. Danielle smiled. I said I'd protect you. I meant it. Outside, the press surged again. But this time, Danielle didn't flinch, because this wasn't just about Jason anymore. It was about every kid who had ever been silenced, every mother who had been dismissed, every injustice swept quietly under the rug. Now it was out in the open, and it wasn't going back. The courtroom was packed tighter than it had ever been. 3 months had passed since the school board hearing exploded into national headlines. Since then, Superintendent Calhoun had resigned under pressure. Officer Trent Calhoun had been indicted, and multiple Westbridge officials were either suspended or placed under investigation. But today was the day that mattered most. The civil trial Danielle had filed against the Westbridge Unified School District had officially begun. Danielle Monroe sat at the plaintiff's table, her posture straight, her expression unreadable. She wore a simple charcoal gray suit, her natural curls pulled back. Next to her sat her legal partner and longtime friend, Naomi Bridges, flipping through their notes. Across from them, the district's attorneys looked rattled, and they had every reason to be. Judge Elliot Barnes entered, commanding silence. The jury sat still, already aware that this wasn't just another legal proceeding. This was a reckoning. Danielle stood. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what happened to my son Jason Monroe was not an isolated incident. It was the result of a system that turned a blind eye to abuse, empowered unqualified personnel, and silenced the parents who dared to speak out. She walked slowly before the jury box, voice steady. Officer Trent Calhoun tackled my son because he fit a description. Jason was 12, unarmed, walking to class. Danielle turned, lifting a printed image. Jason, bruised and tear-streaked, the photo taken at the ER that day. You're going to hear testimony from experts, from parents, from former school employees. But all you really need to know is this. Jason wasn't the first, and he would not have been the last. Throughout the week, witnesses came forward. A retired teacher revealed that security reports were often altered to protect officers. A former board member testified that complaints from Black and Latino families were routinely deprioritized. Even a custodian, teary-eyed, recalled how Jason had apologized to him for getting in the way that day. On the 4th day of trial, the moment everyone had been waiting for arrived. Jason took the stand. The courtroom held its breath as the now 13-year-old sat, hands clasped, eyes calm. Jason, the prosecutor asked gently, can you tell us what happened that day? Jason glanced at his mom, then spoke. I was walking to homeroom. I saw Officer Calhoun coming fast. He shouted something, and before I could answer, he slammed me down. Did you understand why he did that? Jason shook his head. He didn't ask, just grabbed me. Were you scared? Jason swallowed hard. Yeah, but not just of him. I was scared no one would believe me. Danielle blinked back tears. Jason continued, voice growing stronger. But my mom believed me. She always does. By the time closing arguments wrapped, the jury didn't need much convincing. They deliberated for just 2 hours. When the foreman returned, the verdict echoed through the chamber. In favor of the plaintiff, the district is ordered to pay damages totaling $5 million and must implement a complete overhaul of its security policy under independent oversight. Gasps followed by cheers. Danielle exhaled deeply as if for the first time in months. Reporters rushed outside, microphones pointed at her from all sides. But Danielle didn't grandstand. She looked into the cameras and said, "This wasn't just about my son. It's about accountability, about a system that too often protects power instead of people. Today, that system was reminded. It answers to us." Later that week, Danielle visited Jason's middle school, not Westbridge, but a new district. He was laughing in the cafeteria, surrounded by new friends, free of fear. When he spotted her, he ran over and hugged her tight. "Guess what?" he beamed. "I ran for student council, and I won." Danielle smiled. "Of course you did." They walked out together into the bright fall afternoon. A fresh start. This story may be fiction, but the message is real. Every child deserves to feel safe at school. Every parent deserves to be heard, and every system must be held accountable. If you believe in justice, in truth, and in stories that make a difference, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because voices like Danielle's need to be heard, and with your support they will be.